And it says we are live. Good evening, everybody. I am your host, Jones Harwell, and this is Journeys with Jones Harwell. And this evening we have Tina Fumo, the author of Fancy Prison. And I'm just going to jump right into the conversation. I'm going to let her introduce herself, and then I'm going to let her start telling her story. I'm not going to interrupt too much, but to ask a couple of questions here and there. But you guys get ready for this one because I was absolutely floored, and I am just looking at somebody whose tenacity and power of love and belief in her faith got her family through an ordeal, to say the least. Welcome to the show, Tina.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So your book, Fancy Prison, talks about a true life ordeal that you and your family went through at the birth of your granddaughter, losing custody and her being in the child welfare system, foster care system for 6 months until you guys were able to get custody back.
Oh, okay. I'm going to stop you right there. It wasn't
Yes.
6 months. Yeah, it wasn't 6 months. We got her back after 27 days.
Okay.
It happened very, very quickly, and we had a lot of lucky breaks early on. But yeah, so I just wanted to stop you right there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes, be sure, because we want to make sure we're accurate information. But I'm sure that 27 days felt like a lifetime.
It was the longest 27 days of my life. Yes, you're quite right about that.
Okay, so go ahead and start to share your story. Share as much as you would allow, or feel comfortable with sharing. I will let the audience know that you are located in Canada. So what part of Canada are you from?
Yeah, I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. So my book and the story, it starts out with me driving through a blizzard to get to my family. Now, I had only one child. I had a daughter. She was in her 20s, and she gave birth to a daughter, a baby girl, in the neighboring province of British Columbia. So I'm driving through this blizzard in March of 2017 to get to them, because when the baby was born, social workers were involved, and I was confused and I had questions. And we had a friend there with my daughter. She served, she's a friend, but she served in a doula capacity too when she had when we had known her many years ago, when my daughter was growing up in Banff. She left Banff and studied midwifery. So my daughter wanted her there in a doula capacity for the birth of her child.
Okay.
And what we didn't know about Suzanne at the time was that her knowledge about how to navigate the system would prove to be far more valuable to us than her actual doula skills, because babies come out, and actually my granddaughter she was born before Suzanne got there, because Suzanne got held up in traffic or something driving from Vancouver to this small town in British Columbia. And the nurses actually didn't realize that my daughter was giving birth, and because she kept saying, "Oh, I have to, go to the bathroom. I have to go to the bathroom." And then, and then they came in, and my daughter, the baby, came out and was on the bed. So I kind of think now, because when I look back on that story and then the story in Fancy Prison, that my granddaughter, she was calling the shots right from the beginning. It's like, yeah, I'm coming into this world my way, and 2 weeks later, this horrible thing's gonna happen where I get taken from my mommy. But you know what? I have a moment with my Grammy where I let her know everything is gonna be all right. So I'm calling the shots here. cheeky little girl, and she's not a little baby anymore. She's going to be 5 years old next month.
Wow.
And yeah, we've had 5 wonderful years with her. Yeah, she's well, the first one was pretty touch and go, but
Yes.
we did
Yes.
as I corrected you in the introduction, we
Hmm.
did get her back within 27 days. So, and
27 days.
as far as
Mhm.
these cases go, that is a very short time, and that, but by far that helped us a lot by
Mhm,
being
mhm,
able to disrupt the process, because it's quite systematic. I think what happens after that, it's fairly routine how they go about this, yeah, which is
mhm, mhm.
sickening and unfair, quite honestly.
Okay. So what, and we had talked a little bit off camera, and what alarmed me from the beginning was the fact that social services was even there in the beginning to start with. And I
Mhm.
know we had talked that here in the States, normally when social services does get involved, for whatever reason it is, they normally try to place children with family unless there are circumstances that are just not conducive to put them in a home with another family member.
Mhm.
And so for them to show up at the hospital at the point where she's just giving birth and then taking the baby, that just floored me. They didn't even,
Mhm.
or did they not even wait for, had you arrived at that point and were you there in the town ready to take custody of the baby or
No, no, it
the
didn't. No,
thought?
it didn't happen that way. Yeah, it was a very fluid, a very stressful situation. I do explain it a little bit more in my book, but
Mhm,
for the sake now of your listeners, I'll
mhm,
clarify. So when she was born, like I said, Suzanne, my daughter had asked Suzanne to be there in a doula capacity. I
mhm,
wasn't there when she was born. I figured, well, you don't know when babies are going to come, so I'll go and see the baby a month, 2 months, 3 months down the road. I didn't expect to have to drop my life and go see the baby the way that I did.
mhm.
And what
So you
happened
weren't
in
even
that,
at this point. Okay.
no,
So there
no,
was
I
no,
was still in Edmonton, yes. What prompted me to go there was that Suzanne was with my daughter those at the birth. Suzanne arrived there about a half hour after Bianca. It's not a real name, but that's what I call her in the book. A half
mhm,
hour after Bianca was born, and Suzanne actually was the first one that I spoke to after the baby was born, and she said, "Tina, she's beautiful. Everything's beautiful here. You know, she's wonderful." And my daughter was very focused, very very much in that mode that you're in
mhm,
after you give birth
mhm,
to the baby. But what Suzanne didn't tell me was that there were social workers outside of the door. And the staff, the hospital staff, had been alerted that this was a high risk mother and that the baby was to be taken at birth. And so there was kind of whisperings going on in the corner, and Suzanne heard them. And like I said, Suzanne ended up being a far more powerful advocate, um, dealing with the system than she did as a doula. But she kind of knew what was going on, that they were talking about taking the baby. And Suzanne very loudly said to them, "You can't do that," because Suzanne had learned by then all of
mhm,
the CFS, all of the procedures, policies inside out. And she knew that they have to go to court in order to do that. So what they get away with, I'm not going to try to explain it. I don't understand it. It's the same in Canada. Their policies are they're supposed to take the child as a last resort. So why they take them at birth, I don't get it, but they do it all the time. And they're supposed to give the child to next of kin. Again, I get to the town 12 days later when the baby was 12 days old. At Suzanne's request, she just said to me, it's easier to prevent
mhm,
Bianca from going into foster care than trying to get her out afterwards. And I was confused. I'm like, what? But I did what she said. I took her advice and then got there when the baby was 12 years old. And 2 days later, they took her anyway. So again,
mhm.
our policies pretty much are the same here, that children automatically go to next of kin. But I can't tell you why they just did not seem to follow it. There was some other kind of incentive that they wanted they wanted the baby. Like they just kept looking for reasons to take the baby. And even though we had evidence, we proved to exonerate my
Mhm.
daughter
Mhm.
of whatever complaints they were getting, they just ignored it all. And all they did was just negative, 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 look at mistakes, embellish mistakes, and just keep trying to put words on paper and paint my daughter in the worst possible light and get that in front of a judge. So as a mother with my mother bear instinct, okay, and I do write this in my book. I mean, fast forwarding now to 7 months, because
Mhm.
they took her when she was 2 weeks old and we got her back 27 days later. And then there were just lots of things that we did right. We had a lot of lucky breaks, but then fast forward to 7 months and they're still trying to drag this out. And we finally got a judge with half a brain who could see, we were a regular family who was just stressed out and loved our baby. And in that courtroom, in that final court date, I had to listen to that social worker regurgitate the same things about my daughter, not once, not twice, not. This was the fifth time I had to listen to the same things being regurgitated over and over and over again. And it took all of my strength not to lunge across that courtroom and gouge that woman's eyes out. I had had enough of this. Like it was just beyond any kind of cruelty that you can put a
Mhm.
family through. And
Mhm.
like I told you before, we got our baby back. So
Yeah.
I can't imagine
So
going through this. Yeah.
no, I cannot. What were some of the steps that you guys ended up taking? And I know you talk about this at great length for people that are in similar situations, so they'll know where to find some of the resources when they come up against, because the the foster care system and child welfare, I, it's a rocky road.
Mm-hmm.
Got
Mm-hmm.
some social workers out there that are golden, that give their lives, that give their hearts, that give their time day in and day out to do the best that they can for the children that are in their caseloads. And then you've got the group that get burned out and get tired. And then you've got this small little group over here, which you encountered, that for whatever reason it was, and they talk about child trafficking, all of these things that happen that you don't think uh, would ever, who would ever in their right mind think to do some of these things. So what were some of the resources that you mentioned? Suzanne was a great resource because she knew
Oh,
in and out. But what were some of the things that she walked you guys through or helped you do in order for you to help your daughter get custody of her daughter back?
yeah. Okay. That's there's a lot of detail in that answer.
Mhm.
And so I'll just start with the beginning because we did have some lucky breaks. Number one, a good thing was that I actually didn't have a criminal record, so I was a viable solution, which they chose to ignore. So we could always come back to that, and I think
Mhm.
that's what gave us tremendous power,
Okay.
because they would, and I think that they kept trying to look for weaknesses in mine and my daughter's relationships, that relationship that they could exploit,
Mm.
but they couldn't really find anything, because by then I not only was I confused, I was getting quite suspicious as to what their motives were.
Yes.
So we were learning to just like zip it. And my daughter is very, very, very chatty. And when she gets nervous, that gets even more so. But she
Mhm.
learned very, very quickly that when her mother and when Suzanne were there, she was flanked with support. She learned just to keep her mouth shut, okay, and let us do the talking. And Suzanne, in particular, was an incredibly good advocate, because she just knew the steps. So you asked about some of the steps. Okay, when
Mhm.
they took the baby, it's hard to explain that level of trauma. But I was no use. I was lying in my bed, just totally in the fetal position, absolutely traumatized. Suzanne kicked in with right away. She went into breastfeeding skills, like, because there should be a lot more advocating for a mother of a baby, newborn baby, to have her baby so that she can remain breastfeeding. So that was one of the things Suzanne got on right away, was to get freezer bags for the breast milk and keep them frozen and keep that connection going, that she's providing nourishment for the baby. Another thing that we did right away was assert visitation. Monday morning, as soon as that office opened, I phoned them right away and didn't ask. I demanded to see my grandchild, because I knew that we needed to be afforded some rights in all of this. And that number one right is visits. And so for people who are perhaps experiencing this, just assert your right to visit your child, even if it's supervised. Take what you can get. And right now with COVID, they might use COVID as an excuse. Do it by Zoom. But it's really important that you maintain that connection with your children if they're making it difficult for you to see them. And oh geez, another step that so my daughter applied for legal aid, and they often target poor people who they think are isolated. They made a mistake with my daughter, because I don't think that they realized that she had a mother who was willing to drop her life and then be by her side every step of the way. So Suzanne, again, she encouraged my daughter with that step to go to the bank and print out bank statements. Now, these are all things that in no way, shape, or form would my daughter have the wherewithal to have done unless she literally had someone holding her hand and guiding her through this step by step. So she had to go to the bank, get the bank statements to apply for legal aid, so that the following day, when the presentation hearing was in court, my daughter was ready. She had a legal aid lawyer lined up, because she'd gotten the paperwork already. And then I didn't share this in the book, but my daughter, she just listened. She just trusted us and she listened. So we got that lawyer, and I remember watching my little girl go into the courtroom with the lawyer, and the lawyer, he pointed to the exact spot where she should stand. And my daughter, like, she just did it. She just stood exactly where the lawyer said and kept her mouth shut, which is exactly what she's supposed to do. But like if you knew my daughter, you know, that's just so not her personality. But yeah. And then after that, it's just yeah. So that starts to answer your question, but there were many, many, many more steps involved. Yeah. And lots of lucky breaks and lots of frustration. Yeah, it was very emotional, very much a roller coaster ride. Yeah.
So I still am trying to get my head around this. Because I can't. I know. I simply cannot.
Yeah. One of the things that my book, because it took, my guideline for my book actually took quite a long time, because there was just so much to process. And in the end, I had to cut a lot out, because it wouldn't have been possible for me to put every little detail in the book, because I would have lost the reader, and it wouldn't have done justice to the story, because it was a very fluid situation. We had to move fast, we had to act fast, we had to think fast. And so in my book, I cut out a tremendous amount of detail just to keep the story moving. And probably one of the biggest compliments I'm getting now from people who read my book is that it's very well written and it keeps the reader engaged, which is good. That's what I needed to do. And yeah, and because otherwise people are just sitting there like you, like totally confused. And at the end of my book, so I do try to really explain to the best of my ability some of, like what the heck is going on. They did this and this and this, and then I let the reader sort of understand, this is how the story's moving, and let them come to their own conclusion, which is usually the same as mine. complete
Mhm.
confusion, right?
Right,
So,
right,
but at
right.
least it keeps them in the story, like trying to
Mhm,
figure out like what's going on. But
mhm.
in
But
the
one of
end, I just told the story, and this is what happened. So think of it like come to your own conclusion. Yeah.
Mhm. But one of
Mm.
the things that I do like about it is that the you tell it so raw, it,
Mm.
the emotion of it, and you're giving the advice that you went through. And for you, it was a solution and a great outcome. But for some of those grandparents out there, or even parents out there, that they don't get that initial outcome that they want, what advice would you give? And I would specifically, what advice would you give first to the grandparents to be able to help their child in that position, and then help them get their children or grandchildren back?
Mhm. I think I think it's really important that families stay united. If they can present a united front, so even if there's discourse between the mother and the father, if there's old bad blood in the family,
Mhm,
if you can everyone bury the hatchet and work together as a family and make sure that you're all legally represented by one lawyer who has a very clear understanding that, okay, this family wants to keep this baby in this family, and come up with a plan of who's going to care for the child,
mhm,
what do the day-to-day needs come, who's going to
mhm,
provide support system, like for grandparents, because I
mhm,
never went into this situation wanting to take custody of my grandchild. I came in as a grandmother and as a support person,
mhm,
and wanting to advocate for my daughter to keep her own child and keep her in our family so I could be a
mhm.
grandmother. Does that make any sense? So, and that's a
It
lot for
does. It
families
does.
to do,
Mhm,
because they do
mhm,
everything they can to divide and conquer. So that's what they like. That's what I found, that they were looking
mhm,
for, like I said, weaknesses in our relationship between my
mhm.
daughter and I to exploit, so that it was just chaos and confusion, and then it's easier for them to just sort of routinely take the baby. So that is my advice for families. And that is really important. It's really difficult to do, but I think it's really important. And you got to get a lawyer,
Mhm.
because you're navigating through the system. And so much of it is in court that people don't like. Not everybody's a lawyer, but it seems that they seem to think that you need to be a lawyer in order to keep your child. So it's just, again,
Mm,
there's nothing about it I understand. I'm just trying to think of good advice to give to people, to
mhm,
families
mhm,
who are dealing with this, because it's just so it's so ridiculous that what they put people
mhm,
through to fight to get back a child who already belongs to them. And it's just such an incredible waste. It's not doing any good for the children. So why aren't more
mhm.
supports given towards prevention? Why, and preventing families from losing their children? Why aren't more supports given to, perhaps if a family's struggling, to give to them when their children are young, from that precious age of
Right.
newborn to 5 years old, because
Mhm,
it's really important
mhm.
to have a strong family foundation.
Yes, it
and
is.
and yeah, and then I mean, to me it just seems that they just cause these problems, just defer, and then all of a sudden, kids grow up, as they tend to do, and then you got these teenagers with no sense of grounding, no sense of family, no sense of where they belong, no sense of family. I'm like, it's overwhelming. Is Yeah, the
Okay.
problem is
So,
overwhelming. Yeah.
yes. So with this happening, um, it has, oh, hold on just a minute. Hold on here just a minute, because I'm getting some, okay. So
Sorry,
this,
is that something at my end?
No, it's on my end. So
Oh.
we're okay. I heard the phone and then I heard the garage open. So um, this journey has caused you anew to advocate now for
Mhm.
for these rights. So what has happened since? I know you have the book that you've put out and you got the research that you do, and I understand you also have an organization as well that you work
Yeah,
with.
I started, no, well, I started my own charity and it's called Gentle Giants.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I started doing is when I could work, because like I said, for 6 months, I wouldn't let that child out of my sight. So then I needed to find work right away. And then one of the things I started to do right away was fundraise for charities. So I worked on different campaigns. And then finally, when I started working for, and I mentioned this in my book, for
Mm-hmm.
homeless youth, that's when I started to have conversations with people every single day about this this problem, about kids living on the streets. And
Okay.
how did they get there? Like, so trying to get to the root of the problem. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I mostly right now I'm just talking about my book to raise awareness, because I think the
Mm-hmm.
number one thing that I need to pierce is that people automatically assume, and they made this assumption with my daughter, that if child protection is involved in your case, oh, you must have done something wrong. So my book right now explains, no, that's not true. So I need to dispel that myth, because because a lot of times the parents may have made mistakes that get blown out of proportion and they lose their
Mm-hmm.
kids for this. This is not right. Okay, so I need to dispel that myth. No,
Okay.
they didn't, they didn't do something wrong to have children, child protection involved in their case. Often it's the other way around. They kind of put the cart before the horse. It's like, no, we want to be
Mm-hmm.
involved, so we got to figure out how, what the mother did wrong, so that we can kind of fit her in our little cubby hole here and take the baby, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, lots of criticism, but I don't,
Mm-hmm.
so many, but I don't know where to start. Yeah.
My goodness. And you know what? We need to do a part two actually to this conversation. And you
Mm,
want to talk offline and actually do a part two because there's so much ground to cover here. And I
it is. Yeah.
think there are a lot of people that are interested in the conversation.
Mm,
That is just the awareness, because like you said, oftentimes, it's a simple mistake that has been made that blows everything out of proportion. And then
mhm,
are, instead of those that really are in dire circumstances or something's going on that needs it, and even those individuals sometimes they have no resources in place unless they've got
mhm,
a family behind them that is just willing to really rally around them and step up and try to get things and resources and stuff in place. Here's so many horror stories on both sides. It's
mhm,
real. So where tell people, for my listening audience, where they can find your book and how,
mhm.
if they are interested in advocating and learning more information about the some of the platforms and things that you're doing, even in Canada, to help, maybe start something here in the US that would be similar to help kids in similar situations and families and situations.
Oh, yeah, okay. So, yeah, you're right. We're gonna have to do part two. That's a lot. I do touch
Mm-hmm.
on this a bit in my book. So first of all, find the best way to, I think, to find me and to find the book is Google Fancy Prison, but put my name in it, because if you just Google Fancy Prison, you're gonna end up with guys who are doing white collar crime in country club prisons. And that's not what my book is about. So I'm going to hold my book up here. My book, I
Yeah,
don't know if you
please
can see
hold it
that.
up.
Yeah.
Scoot it
So my
over a
book,
little bit. I guess it's to my right, which I might be your left.
my left. Okay.
There we
Yeah.
go.
So there,
Yes.
the Fancy Prison, calling BS on the child welfare industry. So when
Okay.
you find, when you find this book, so be specific, Google Fancy
Mhm.
Prison by Tina Fumo, Fumo. When you find the book on Amazon, you will see this beautiful little baby, Delana Sullivan, and I talk about Delana in my book. You'll see, I lived in Banff for many years, so you see a beautiful picture of Mount Rundle, which is a prominent mountain in Banff. And just open my book and start reading, because it was a very fluid situation. And part of the beauty of being able to write things out is that I can try to organize my thoughts, which is easier to do when I write it out and take the time than I can in a conversation, because there's just so much in a conversation, and you start going off on tangents, and I don't want to do that, because your listeners will go, this is one crazy Canadian here, you know. So.
and give them your website.
Oh, so the website it's kind of long, www.gentlegiants.academia.edu. So Gentle Giants, just like it's spelt, just like it sounds, and then .academia, so ACADEMIA.edu for education. And I think there's lots that people can do, starting with their attitude. Like I said, just piercing that. Don't make assumptions. Don't assume just because somebody has child protection involved in their lives that they did something to deserve it. They didn't. Okay. Like chances are they didn't. So just keep an open mind about that. Read my book. And when you get to the end of my book, ask yourself the questions. What would you do if this was your child? And does any of this make any sense? And does it sound like it's in the best interest of the child? So I think we need to, as advocates, start asking questions. And we have a right to ask these questions, because it is our tax dollars that are paying for this. Okay. This is the way children are being treated in this system. They are falling through the cracks. The cracks are getting bigger. And I think COVID is not helping the situation. So we have a right to advocate how our dollars are being spent, what we think is a better solution for children, because right now this isn't a solution. The system is broken, and it is not serving in the best interest of the children. It's I guess there's I mean, in my book I mentioned things like McKinsey Friends, or Court Watch. So Court Watch is just going in and again supporting somebody like that single mom who, keep an open mind. Just because child protection is involved in her case doesn't mean that she's done anything wrong. So even if you sort of listen to her and support her when she has to go to court, I mean, that is so intimidating for people who are involved in this. And my daughter had a team, like I said, so going to court, like she was not afraid of going to court because she had us with her. But I mean, think about that single mom who needs the support. Exactly. Exactly. Like, I just want to give everyone such a big hug, but my book is hope, like for people who are faced with this and they're just beyond stress, like it's just an unbearable amount of pain and stress to deal with. And you feel like giving up, just don't. Like, if you feel like, I can't beat them, I can't win, I don't have, the resources or the money, love finds a way, and love really does conquer all. So don't give up, because if you don't fight for your children, who else will? And going back to the beginning of my book where Suzanne gives me the advice, like, just do. It is easier to prevent your children from going into the system than trying to get them out of it. So just try to live your life in God's grace, do right by your children, and you only get one chance to raise a child. So, but for the love of God, like, do the best that you can and give them that good chance, because if you're, anyway, I could go off on a I can go off on a soapbox, but you're sort of understanding it.
Yes. As a parent and a mother, yes, we get it. We get it. I thank you so much for taking the time to share this with the audience today, and the courage and your strength. It shows.
Mm.
Keep being an advocate out there. We are definitely going to have a part 2 to this conversation because there are no real answers, and we need to find
No.
answers. We really
Well, we need to,
find
yeah,
some
we need to
answers.
start asking the right questions, and
The
we
right
have a right to
questions.
start questioning it. Yeah, yeah, for
And I
sure.
think
So
that's
yeah,
the first, I think that's probably the first point
mhm. Yeah, yeah,
is
definitely,
to,
def, definitely part 2. Yeah, I look forward
Mhm.
to it. Yeah, have
Okay.
we been talking for half an hour already? Yeah,
Yes, we have.
yeah, we have. Okay.
So once again, give, I know your website is www.gentlegiants.academia.edu.
Mhm.
Book can be found on, I believe you said Amazon, but I think they can also get it off of your website too. Is that correct?
No, no, just on
Just off
Amazon.
of
Yeah,
Amazon?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Go
No,
ahead and give them the title of the book again.
yeah, it's Fancy Prison by Tina Fumo, Fumo. And if you Google, then it has social media accounts where you can link up to that. And a lot of times it will link back to podcasts like this,
Mm-hmm.
and then various links with Amazon where you can find my book and get in touch with me. Yeah.
Yes, and I'll definitely put your information in the comments so they'll have it. It'll be
Mhm.
attached permanently to this broadcast. And I thank you so much again for taking the time to talk with me and our audience this evening. It has been an eye-opening conversation.
Mhm.
You guys will be doing a part 2 to this. Please stay tuned to my page. And as soon as we get our schedules together, we will come back and have a part 2 of the conversation.
Sounds good. Sounds good. It was a good start tonight. That sounds good.
Yes,
Thanks.
it definitely was. This is a continuation. So for everybody, this wraps up my month of January for
Oh,
2022 for Journeys with Jones Harwell. I'll be back with you guys next week with some new guests. Stay tuned. I've got some other little fun things that we're going to be doing this year connected to my son and the love of sports. So got some things going on there. But Tina, thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is a wrap for this show. Thank you, everybody. This was Journeys with Jones Harwell, and we'll see you next week.